responsibility. Guess what the next heading is? Mythologize. Let's not even go there. Let's not even go there, okay? Let's just leave it be over there. But here you have a brilliant summing up of how to construct an alternative reality. So, and how to invent an alternative readership in a generation that believes this is journalism, because that's what they're all exposed to. Oh, the other thing that the internal memo of the world's largest English newspaper, it also tells you some other fascinating things, but we'll come back to that later. We'll get back to that in a bit. There are 5, 6, 7 processes or whatever we can talk about today, which we can go over quickly. One is, what are the features of the media that we're doing, and then we come to the ownership and stuff. Number one, the fundamental feature of the media of our times, in my estimate, is, as I've said often, those of you who read me have seen that, the fundamental feature of the media of our times is the growing disconnect between mass media on the one hand and mass reality on the other. That's the first. The second is what characterizes the media. Now, a structural shutout of the poor. This is not neglect. Poor people are not wanted. The instructions, the memos of all these newspapers tell us this clearly. Who is the target reader, who is not, which areas we are interested in, which localities we are not interested in. Okay? So there's a structural shutout of the poor. Just to give you an example of what that would mean, it means if you look at the beats that are organized in newspapers, nobody has a full-time agriculture correspondent. The Hindu has a full-time agriculture columnist who does go to the field, unlike most columnists. And for the rest, everybody assumes that I am that one. But I have something in my brief beyond exclusively covering agriculture. I have to cover a lot of things that are not agriculture. Migrations, things like that. Rural India is not only about agriculture, but primarily, I suppose. So, if you look at the beats, no newspaper today has a full-time labor correspondent. The labor correspondent is extinct. The labor beat is covered by the guy who does industrial relations. It's included in his portfolio. He talks about labor to management. He gets the PRO of the company to tell him about labor. So the labor correspondent is extinct. The agriculture correspondent is like the Yeti, occasional sightings but no confirmation. When you say, I will not have an agriculture correspondent, I will not have a labor correspondent, you are saying, I am not going to talk to 75% of the Indian population. That's what you say. You are saying 75% of the population do not make news. Do labor not make news in a country, by the way, which has lost an estimated 4 million jobs plus since 2008? September, just the export-related industries and the government's estimate lost 1.5 million jobs, 15 lakh jobs between September 2008 and May 2009. 5 lakh jobs in the first 3 months after September 2008, while many states like Maharashtra were losing millions of jobs before the recession began. But we don't have labor correspondents because how do they make news? The third point, the corporate hijack of the media agenda is one issue, and then the corporate hijack of the media itself. You can have a lot of fun getting onto the websites of various media groups and surfing their boards of directors. It's phenomenal. The heads of McDonald's, guys who are also board members of General Electronic, Mobil Oil, Raytheon and others, the top corporate heads of India are on the boards of some media or the other. It's just phenomenal. It is corporate incest within corporate incest. The fourth feature of the media is that I would argue that of all the institutions of Indian democracy, the media are socially the most exclusionist arm of the Indian democracy. The worst government has far greater representation across the social spectrum because it is necessary and mandated by law and constitution. Try finding Dalits in the media. Try finding Adivasis in the media. Try finding them at any significant position in any major media. It's not going to be easy for you. You will find one where some individuals have taken a very conscious decision to try and expand their presence. Fourth, to borrow a phrase from my friend Professor Prabhat Patnaik, the moral universe of the media has shifted, and shifted significantly. Something very fundamental has changed. It's changed in the country and has to change in the media as well. It's changed in the country. If you're looking at the agrarian crisis, for instance, and we'll come to the media and that, just consider one thing. Consider one point about the agrarian crisis, the largest we've had in 50 years. Consider this. In the 1960s and 70s, I can say many activists in this audience, in the 1960s and 70s, we had mass peasant struggles. We had battles for land reform that resulted in the distribution of millions of acres of land over time. We had mass peasant struggles in the 1960s and 70s. In the 1990s and 2000s, you have mass peasant suicides. Something fundamental has changed about how India thinks. Something fundamental has shifted about how this country and how this society functions. Why did mass protests, mass struggles give way to mass suicides in the largest section of our population, where suicides are running at much higher rates, far higher rates than non-farmers or general population? And nothing happens about it because the moral universe of the media has shifted. Sixth, media as a key figure in the establishment of corporate world, as the ideological arm. In sum, I would say the Indian media are politically free, imprisoned by profit. That we are politically free if you choose to be. Now, how does one evaluate journalism? Is there some broad measure by which we can say something is good journalism or bad journalism or relevant journalism? I believe there is. I believe good journalism, any journalism which will always, any journalism of relevance will always be judged on the basis, at some point, it will be judged on the basis of how we engage with the great processes of our time. Whether it was Thomas Paine and the French Revolution and the American Revolution, which he engaged with, whether it was Gandhi, Ambedkar and Bhagat Singh and the freedom struggle that they engaged with. The journalism of an era will be judged by how it dealt with the giant processes of its time. What are the giant processes of our time? Let me take just a handful. They are not exhaustive. They are not priority listed. Nothing of the sort. Take A, growing hunger. Okay. And we are now in the midst of what is the greatest sustained price rise in our history since 1973-74. Since then, this is the greatest sustained price rise. At the same time, we are witnessing a collapse of per capita daily net availability of food grain and cereals in the population. For the period 2005 to 2008, the food grain availability is 432 grams per day, which is less than it was in 1955 to 1958, according to the Government of India's Economic Survey. Okay. Something very fundamental is happening in hunger. Where are the media on it? That's one great process. The massive price rise and job losses. Job losses are the second massive process going on. Third, the greatest agrarian crisis in 50 years. Fourth, huge displacements accompanied by the rape of the environment and natural resources. Five, the fastest growing inequality in our society's history as an independent nation. And six, the greatest loot and grab sorting in our independent history. A crony casino capitalism that has come to roost. You know, I see nothing that's happening in the Commonwealth Games that does not happen every day in our society, around us, in the cities we live in and the way they are run. All that's happening is that we're seeing them all together in one institution at one time in a very high profile place. Otherwise, this is how cities are run. This is how buildings are made. This is how contracts are handed out. Welcome to the world. It's nothing new. It's just happening in some place we don't like it because we are so obsessed with how the world looks. By which we mean the Gora word, of course, nothing more than that.